Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
At least in North Carolina, the debate around funding, optimizing, and deploying higher education assets has been passionate and acerbic at times. And when feelings run so close to the surface on a topic like this, it usually means there is a lot at stake. Welcome again to the most widely watched source for Carolina business and public policy, and there is a lot at stake. The concern to get things right about education, what many call our biggest resource for the future, is not exclusive to the Tar Heel State, but just as hot in the Palmetto State. So we will continue what has been a topic of discussion for weeks now, education, and later on, the new president at Furman, Dr. Elizabeth Davis.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Melanie Barton of the South Carolina Education Oversight Committee, Dan Kimberg of Student U, and special guest Dr. Elizabeth Davis, President of Furman University. And now, here's Chris Williams.
Hello, welcome to our program. We are talking about education and have been talking about education for a while now. Melanie, Dan, welcome to the program. Hope this is just not painful for you. I'm sure we're going to try to make it not.
We're happy to be here. Yeah.
Melanie, let's start with you. In South Carolina, about a month or so ago, we had the State Superintendent of Education, Molly Spearman, on this program. Did not get a chance to talk about the Abbeville lawsuit. And I'm going to do my best, and I hope you'll correct me, but the Abbeville lawsuit basically says that many rural school districts are not getting resources from the state, and they're compelled now by the South Carolina State Supreme Court to even that playing field to some degree. So not so much about the decision itself, but does this lawsuit, 20 years in the making, that tries to bring those resources to the kids in the less than influential areas. Is this really a dialogue about rural versus urban that we've been having now the past year or two?
It's continuing that discussion about urban versus rural. We've got two committees that are working on it right now in the House and the Senate. And as we listen to debate and we listen to testimony, what we're becoming more and more familiar with is a difference of attracting quality teachers, leaders, and superintendents in those rural areas. That is where the big issue is. It's a lack of capacity. It's a lack of leadership, not as much resources in money, but resources in people.
Okay, so Melanie, and not to interrupt you, but to keep this going, so in a poor county, let's say Hampton, Colleton County, one of those counties, if you recruit the right superintendent and the right principal, is that the majority of the issue? Will it not fix itself, but is that in a large part going in the right direction?
That's the issue, because when you look at some of our Abbeville plaintiff districts have done really well educationally. When you look at what's the difference between those that made tremendous gains in the past 20 years, it's leadership at the school, at the local board level, and in the classroom. So leadership drives the educational agenda. The community gets involved in educational reform. That's what we're seeing. In others, the Supreme Court noted that there were, quote, educational ghettos. That struck a nerve with a lot of folks, because in some of our areas, in some of our districts, those lines are based on race. And we have to get beyond that, because in the rural areas, we have a declining in student enrollment. So a lot of our rural areas are declining, And those issues have to come into place. Do we need to consolidate services? Do we need to consolidate districts so that students get better educational opportunities?
Dan, you know, Durham County and that part of the triad is no stranger to low-income students trying to get a fair education, or just in general. When you hear Melanie talk about, how do you reflect on this for North Carolina and specifically the triangle?
It's important to first say that we believe that all students can succeed, regardless of the color of their skin or how much money their parents have in their pocket. All students have that ability to succeed through school, to go to college, and then to give back to their communities. The interventions that are necessary, depending on the context of a neighborhood, whether someone is in a rural area or an urban area, or the context of a family, is really important to keep in mind when planning what should be done to help those students.
So, not to put words in your mouth, and you know, this could go in a completely wrong way, but am I hearing that this is not about race, that this is about class?
I believe that but both are really critical to talk about. I think it's easy for us to just focus on class. Somehow we live in a society where talking about money is a little bit more comfortable than talking about race. And I think that the systemic racism that does exist in our communities impacts students a lot and needs to be addressed.
Yeah, go ahead, Mom.
Yeah, when you look at the achievement gaps in our state, I just did some analysis of the ACT and SAT scores for our graduating class last year. Among African Americans, 4% were college ready on ACT in our state, 9% on the SAT, compared to their white and Hispanic counterparts. Threefold difference. That's a problem that we've got to address head on.
Can you address it with what the Education Oversight Committee in South Carolina, is that the bogey? Is that the center of the bullseye for you?
That's the center of the bullseye. You have to continually to close that achievement gap, but not lowering the standards. You can't lower the top to meet the bottom. We've got to raise the bottom up. So what we're looking at in accountability is really putting a big focus on closing the achievement gap in our state. How do we do that? But you've got to get the buy-in from the community. We've got to address that there's a huge achievement gap.
Yeah, so where's the bigger argument made? Is it with the community? Is it with the parents? Is it with the educators? Or is it with those who make policy, in your case in Raleigh and in your case Columbia? Which is the bigger one?
So I'll say everyone.
Great.
It's critical that everyone comes together, and it's important for us to understand both the achievement gap, but also the education debt that has existed over generations as a result of the poor quality of education, especially African Americans and Latinos have received in this country. So it's not just about what's going on today, it's about the historical context that leads to the challenges that are faced today.
Is there anyone in this country that is doing that right, that has the model, that has drawn attention to a very successful program for any of these, at least the broad issues that we're talking about, that you can point to and say, you know what, in Indianapolis, they've done this really well, and we would love to adopt that model?
Yeah, so I think because every community is so different, there is no way to just take a great program from one community and bring it to another community. There are lots of places that are really focusing on identity development and helping students develop a positive racial identity, which then can lead to them developing a positive scholarly identity. So there are places around the country that do that. I don't believe there's any one model that can just be transferred onto Durham.
But there's got to be a best practice that you look at, Melanie.
The best practice is how do you engage, how do you change the expectations? Expectations are the key to this. How do you change expectations, and how do you incentivize the behavior? And that's what we do with the accountability system. So if accountability...
Incentivize an educator or a student?
Both.
So,
it needs to be
you're
both.
really focused on the educator.
That's it, in our accountability system. But that's how you have to do. You have to think about what incentives will change the behavior. And what we're really looking at is looking more at the business community in our state to say, you need to help us to communicate that message to parents about the importance of being college and career ready. Because no longer in our state or in North Carolina is a high school diploma sufficient to have a living wage going forward. You've got to have that post-secondary experience.
Okay, that's going to be the last word. We'll bring our guest out who has something to say about education. We'll find out in just a moment. Next week on this program, his name is Mikey Johnson. Mikey is not only CEO of one of the most prominent family businesses in South Carolina, Cox Industries, but he is also the chairman of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce. So he sits at the nexus of policy, of family, of business, of import, of export. That's Mikey Johnson. Then in 2 weeks, Jim Rogers, the former chairman and CEO of this nation's largest energy utility, Duke Energy, will be here. As among other credentials, a Duke graduate, a Baylor academic, and administrative alum, so seemingly she is loyal to the South. A bit uncharacteristically, though, she has a business and accounting background and is now the 12th named president in Furman University's 189-year-old storied history, bringing a new set of eyes, hopes, and what some have called a keen understanding of higher education for the venerated upstate liberal arts school. We welcome to the program and certainly welcome back to the Carolinas Dr. Elizabeth Davis. President Davis, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Good to have you here. Elizabeth, about 3 weeks ago, right in that chair, sat the UNC system president, Tom Ross, and we asked him this question, and we're going to ask you the same question. What is the value? What is the true value in today's dollars, but also in today of a 4-year education?
Well, I'm going to follow what Melanie said. I mean, she said that we have to encourage our students to take the next step. Post-secondary education is so important to earn a living wage in this country. And so all the studies show that earning capabilities are exponential with a 4-year degree relative to a high school degree. The other thing too, though, is I want to challenge people to think beyond just the wage that's earned out upon graduation. A 4-year degree is a 40-year degree. The recent Gallup-Purdue study that came out showed that workers were more engaged at work. They felt like the quality of life was higher when they went to an institution where they found a mentor, someone who cared about them, someone who encouraged them to pursue their passions. And really, 17 and 18-year-olds right out of high school don't know what those are, and that those 4-year degrees allow them to really discover, apart from home, really discover who they are, what they do well, and how they want to contribute to our country, to our democracy.
You know, clearly your cost-benefit analysis experience in public accounting has come into play, and you make a good argument. But President Davis, back to the question about, when you've got a family that's earning a median income, and I would grant it that Furman is not perfect for everyone and is not appropriate for everyone, but almost public universities now in North and South Carolina are becoming out of reach for the average family. How do we keep this from becoming an elite club just to get into a decent school?
Well, I think Dan hit it. It's everybody's problem. We all need to come together and say, if we want our country to continue greatness, if we want innovation, then we all are going to have to invest. And that means underwriting particular programs that help students achieve. Because it is that intimate connection with a faculty member, with a staff member, and that's not inexpensive. Those kinds of programs, the kinds of things that Dan does with Student U is not inexpensive, but the gains are tremendous. So that's what we're looking to do, is to collaborate with partners, with other institutions or with businesses to make a Furman education accessible.
Melanie, question?
Yeah, Elizabeth, thinking a lot about the industry in this country, everything's talking about STEM. For a liberal arts education at Furman, how do you combat that when people say, well, why do we still need liberal arts institutions?
Well, first of all, the sciences are part of the liberal arts, and in fact, about 40% of Furman students get a degree in the sciences. But what we know about the sciences, and students who study the sciences still need the liberal arts because they need to be able to consider their innovations from multiple directions. Sociologically, if I introduce this innovation into a community, what's going to happen? We had that conversation earlier, right? About when communities build up and become much more attractive, but it ends up pushing others to the margins. So to be able to think through all the implications of innovation, and I think that's what the liberal arts allows, because students study across the disciplines, not just STEM, not just humanities, but across the disciplines.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about the financial barriers to college, and I know Furman has this 2020 vision, and a part of the strategic plan is thinking about diversity and inclusion. I'm curious to hear a little bit about not just how you ensure that students of color can get onto campus, but how you support them once they're there so they can get the full benefit of a Furman degree.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things, you know, that we realize is different students are going to have different needs, and so we need to be sure that we have the programmatic needs to meet and have resources available for, say, first-gen students, to have the multicultural programs so that students of all ethnicities and races get to express you know, their backgrounds and learn how to talk to each other. You can attract people to campus, but if the programs aren't there to help support them, to sustain them, to make them feel a part, then they won't be successful. And that's what we're doing. We just had 2 recent hires out of student life. We have a great diversity and inclusiveness committee that's looking at the ways that we can change how we go about business. We don't want to start bringing in a bunch of faculty or staff that we can't support. And that's been an ongoing conversation. Last year was our 50th anniversary of desegregation at Furman, and we had the hard conversations. We talked historically what it meant for Furman to have an integrated campus and the struggles and what it still means today. So what I'm so proud of about Furman is, while you said we still have things that we need to get right, we're not afraid of difficult conversations.
You know, you used the term, Dr. Davis, engaged learning. Not long ago, Per-Olof Loof, who is the CEO of Kemet, was on our program. He's in your neighborhood, and said this is a very important item in a company that's looking for a partner in academics. Is there, how do you take more advantage of that? And especially at Furman, how do you reach out? How much red is left on the candy, so to speak, that you can take advantage of getting these businesses, not just funding, but in-kind type of relationship to help you kind of go to the next level?
Well, I think it has to be very deliberate, very intentional, because Furman only graduates, 700 kids a year. That's way different than someone who graduates 8,000 students a year. So I joke we have to make it worth the trip. So we want to be able to show what Furman students are able to do, and then find ways that we can match up students with particular programs, because it is those experiences. It is how academics and what they learn in the classroom comes to life. It was something that was coined at Furman or used at Furman over 20 years ago. So we've been in the business of engaged learning for a long time, but now it's time to take it to the next level. In my inauguration address, I challenged our faculty, I challenged our alumni to think about engaged learning, not just what it does for the student, but for the student to pivot and think, how do I engage and learn to collaborate for the benefit of the community in which I live? They'll still learn as much, but to learn how to be a conscious contributor to making the quality of life better in their communities, I think is something that education should be all about, and is something that Furman has done within Greenville County for a long time.
Is that an alum association function, or is that some kind of DNA that you imprint on the student when they're at school?
Furman was founded for the benefit of the community in which it was at the time. And so it's been in our DNA for 189 years. Part of that is helping students as they come in to understand what it means to be a part of the community, and that although, you've heard people say, think globally and act locally, we have global problems in Greenville County. When our students work through our poverty minor and do the summer-long internship in Greenville and the surrounding areas, when they graduate, they take that learning to the communities in which they live. They know what it means to have the economic and philosophical and anthropological views that surround poverty, and they know that it's not just something that if we just educated better, it would all be solved.
Yeah, right.
Or if we just had more jobs, it would all be solved. It's complex, and that's what we want our students to understand.
Melanie?
Yeah, talking about the community, and I think that's what we all agree on. It's got to be the whole. Talk about the programs that you're doing in Greenville for the students.
One of the programs I'm so proud of is called our Bridges to a Brighter Future program. We've had that since about 2000, and although it's a Furman program, which makes it different from Student U, we partner very closely with the high schools in Greenville County, and they nominate students to be part of a cohort of 25. So they start in 9th grade, and they have a summer program that helps them learn what it means first to be successful in high school. So the students accepted into the program have to be free lunch eligible, have a 3.0 GPA, and no record of behavioral problems. So it's kids who have the capabilities and the support. There still needs to be, the family will say, yes, I want my child to be a part of this. We just need the help of Bridges to be able to do it. And then they have, so they have the summer program, but then they have Saturday school to keep them engaged throughout the school year. Then summer program, Saturday school. We found that the students accepted into that program have all graduated. Since 2000, all have graduated from high school and have been accepted to college. One of the things we learned early on, though, was we thought, okay, they've been accepted to college. And then that summer before college, something would happen and they wouldn't go. So
what percentage of that would?
You know, I can't remember. It's probably, though, in the neighborhood of about 30 to 40%.
A meaningful
Something
amount.
happens. You know, you make a phone call to the college, somebody doesn't answer, or it doesn't make sense. I don't understand how to register for classes. So we added what's called the bridge, crossing the bridge, which means from high school crossing into college, and that has raised the success rate of getting students into college. And then again, like Student U, we keep up with them, especially that first year, the second year, and then as they need it, those last 2 years. So that's a program where we're proud of, but it is very intense, hands-on, and scalable only to the extent that we can add more students, more leaders, more directors, and more resources. Another program that I'm so proud of, and this was one of the surprises coming to Furman, was sort of the breadth of reach of Furman, but we have the Riley Institute at Furman, named for Dick Riley, former governor of South Carolina and Secretary of State. One of the programs offered by the Riley Institute is called the Diversity Leaders Initiative. We have educated over 1,400 leaders in the state of South Carolina through the Diversity Leaders Initiative, teaching how to work in diverse environments. They do projects together. And besides just 1,400 leaders, the reputation of the Riley Institute as the go-to institute for diversity has been really quite fulfilling, I'll say. So after the Charleston shootings and the Duke Energy decided they wanted to fund something to help with the law enforcement, but also with high school students. And they funded the they funded the Riley Institute DLI program to be adapted for law enforcement leaders down in Charleston, and a program for high school students, because they also offer an emerging public leaders program to help develop those skills in high school students. So I'm so proud of the reach that Furman has across the ages and across the state.
We've got about literally a minute left. You got a quick question in there, Dan?
Yeah, if in 10 years we came to visit Furman and you had succeeded at creating a really inclusive community, what would we see when we walked on campus?
I've been asked that question by alumni before, and I will tell them it's not new buildings. The faces will look different. The faces in terms of ethnicity, race, but also age. We have a vibrant OSHA Lifelong Learning, 1,700 members. I really want to see us mix in terms of age, background, perspectives, ethnicity. So I think that's what you'd see. The faces will look different.
President Davis, welcome to the Carolinas. Welcome back.
Thank you.
In
Great to be back.
A bit of a different role now. And I don't think, just a quick comment, I don't think you can overstate the impact of the Riley Institute with, of course, the Honorable Dick Riley and the Honorable David Wilkins, both involved.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. Good luck going forward.
Thank you.
Please
Thanks,
come
Chris.
back.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for watching our, Dan, thanks for making the trip to Durham. Melanie, thanks for coming up from Columbia.
Pleasure.
As always. Thank you for watching our program. If you have any questions or comments, please make those comments. We'd love to hear what you think and who you'd like to see and what the dialogue should be. CarolinaBusinessReview.org. That is the website. Thanks for watching. Next week, Mikey Johnson. The dialogue continues. Until then, I'm Chris William. We hope you have a nice weekend. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.